This guy fakes his own murder, leaves behind a completely convincing corpse, then watches Soul Society tear itself apart while looking for the killer, and then casually reveals he was alive the entire time? That's a wild, wild prank. That's Aizen, and we just can't hate him, even if he's a villain. But why? Why do we keep falling for characters who are supposed to repulse us? Well, turns out anime has figured out the answers to that. 6 separate psychological levers, 6 completely different reasons a villain can worm his way into your favorites list. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every unkillable fan favorite bad boy is running on one of these 6. Let's get started. If you've watched Bleach, you know this man is the reason Plot Twist became a whole personality trait for the show. For a huge chunk of the Soul Society arc, Aizen is just a captain. Quiet, polite, and wears super nerdy glasses. The kind of guy you'd trust to water your plants. But then, it turns out he'd been faking his entire personality for years, faked his own assassination, and revealed himself as the most dangerous being in Soul Society. Yeah, but fans still couldn't hate him, and here's why. He's calm, he doesn't yell or rage, he just wins. He's always 5 steps ahead of everyone, including you, the viewer. He gets sealed away in the deepest level of Soul Society's prison system for what should be a real ending, and it still doesn't feel like one, because the guy's so composed, you expect him to talk his way out eventually. And he almost gets the chance. Years later, when Johan, the final strongest threat in the entire series, frees him and offers him a place at his side, Aizen just says no. He doesn't want to serve anyone, not even the strongest man alive. That's a villain who wins even in defeat. So why do we love him? Because he is the mastermind. No, not that one. An actual clever mastermind, Aizen's competence has its own kind of charisma. He never begs for mercy, loses control, or waits for someone else to save him. He always seems completely in command of the situation, even when everything around him is falling apart. We don't root for him because he's a good person. We enjoy watching him because there is something deeply satisfying about someone who is incredibly good at what they do, even when the thing they mastered is being a villain. Now, the next example should not be a fan favorite, but it still is. Hisoka is a card-throwing, bloodthirsty psychopath who only cares about fighting strong opponents so he can wait for their potential to ripen. That's disturbing. That's not a redeeming quality, and yet, every time he's on screen, you wonder, what's he gonna do next? That's the whole trick. His Nen ability, Bungee Gum, is one of the most creative powers in the series. It behaves like rubber and gum, letting him redirect attacks, bind opponents, even rebuild his own limbs in ways that make 0 sense, until he explains them. And even then you're rewinding the fight in your head, trying to figure out what had happened. He's not fighting for money or revenge or power in any conventional sense. He just wants to find someone strong enough to actually challenge him, and he's willing to wait years for the right opponent to grow into that. There's something almost respectful buried in that patience, in a deeply unsettling way. So why do we actually love him? He's the opposite of the mastermind. Aizen wins by being unreadable and controlled. Hisoka wins by being chaotic and unpredictable. He's the entertainer. Fun to watch. And fun to watch turns out to be a currency its own, completely separate from whether we approve of him. But enough of the fun. With the next one, we are getting heavy. If you've seen a red monster, you know what I'm talking about. Johan Liebert is widely considered one of the best written villains in all of fiction, not just anime. He's the third type, the tragic monster. Quite fitting, right? Johan's backstory starts with childhood trauma most of us can't imagine. He was subjected to psychological experiments at an institution called Kinderheim 511, an orphanage secretly designed to strip children of their identity and turn them into obedient, emotionless tools. Johan came out broken in a way that's almost philosophical. He doesn't believe life has meaning. He says most of the universe is basically just death waiting to happen. And instead of killing people instantly, he manipulates them into destroying themselves. The reason fans can't hate him is that Monster never lets you see him as a cartoony villain. You see the kid he used to be. You see the sister who loved him. You see a person shaped entirely by the horror done to him. Well, of course that's not an excuse, but it's a reason. And that contrast is what makes Johan one of the most psychologically rich characters ever. This is the most direct opposite compared to Type 1 and 2. We're not admiring his skill or enjoying his chaos. We're recognizing a wound. Sympathy for villains like that don't require approval. They just require understanding. And Monster gives you quite enough of that. Notice something? None of these 3 villains are likable because they're good people. Aizen isn't sympathetic, Hisoka isn't admirable, Johan isn't fun. They're likable because each one satisfies a completely different need for the audience. Competence, entertainment, understanding, and none of those needs have anything to do with morality. They just need to be satisfying some psychological itch that has nothing to do with whether we'd want to have dinner with them. Keep that in mind, because the back half of this list pushes that idea even further. Type 4, the ideologue, elegant, calm, terrifyingly polite, and underneath all of that, an actual devil. Literally, Makima is revealed to be the control devil, a being born from humanity's fear of being controlled, but for most of the series, she hides that behind the friendliest, softest exterior imaginable. Makima genuinely believed she was building towards something good, a world without war, death, or fear, but the method for getting there involved treating everyone around her like a pet on a leash. I mean, especially Denji. And by the end, you find out exactly how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. And yet, top tier popular, cause Makima proves you don't need to be loud to be terrifying. Fans didn't fall for her because she's misunderstood. They fell for her because Fujimoto wrote a villain who feels like a genuine, consistent philosophy, walking around in human form. Every cruel thing she does traces back to one internal logic. That's rare. Makima isn't chaotic like Hisoka or wounded like Johan. She's consistent. One villain whose evil actually makes internal sense is somehow scarier and more magnetic than one who's just cruel for cruelty's sake. Our next type might have had the best character arc in anime, period. Meruem starts the Chimera Ant arc as an absolute monster. He kills his own mother during birth, kills other Chimera Ants who annoy him, views humans purely as food. Then, he meets Komugi, a blind girl who's a board game prodigy and the only person who's ever beaten him at anything. Through their games together, Meruem slowly, and I mean slowly, starts to understand humility, connection, and what it actually means to care about someone. By the end, after Netero detonates the poor man's rose, an in-universe equivalent of an atomic bomb, Meruem is dying from its fallout, and his last wish isn't power or revenge. It's just to spend his final moments playing one more game with her. Komugi, knowing the poison is contagious, chooses to stay with him anyway. He's what we call the redeemed monster. It's one of the most quietly devastating endings in anime, and it happens to a character who started the arc as a genocidal war criminal. This is the lever none of the first 4 villains offer, cause Aizen, Hisoka, Johan, and Makima never actually change. They're static. Meruem is the one villain on this list who becomes someone genuinely different by the end. And watching a monster learn to be a person is a completely different kind of satisfying than watching one execute a plan. Our last example is the main antagonist of the entire first arc of Vinland Saga, the mercenary who orchestrated the death of Thorfinn's father. The whole reason Thorfinn spends years chasing him for revenge, but Askeladd is just smarter than everyone else in the room, constantly. He's our last type, the honorable enemy. He's playing a political long game the entire time, secretly trying to protect his homeland of Wales from being invaded, all while posing as a greedy mercenary captain. When King Swain corners him into choosing between Wales and Prince Canute, Askeladd takes a third option nobody saw coming. He kills the king himself, in front of the entire court, feigning madness to sell the act. It buys Wales its safety and hands Canute the throne, and Askeladd knows exactly what it costs him. Canute, the very prince he just sacrificed everything to protect, is the one who has to cut him down to secure his own legitimacy. He dies in front of Thorfinn, never letting him get his revenge, and it completely destroys Thorfinn's entire sense of purpose. Fans didn't just tolerate Askeladd, a huge chunk of the fanbase considers him the best character in the whole show. This is respect earned in hindsight. We spend an entire arc thinking Askeladd is simply ruthless, and only at the very end do we learn the ruthlessness was in service of something honorable the whole time. That recontextualizing is its own unique payoff. Different from admiring raw skill, cause here we're admiring character, not competence. We admire Aizen's intelligence and control. Hisoka entertains us with his unpredictable nature. Johan earns sympathy through tragedy. Makima fascinates us with her beliefs. Meruem keeps us invested because he changes, and Askeladd slowly earns our respect. Each of these villains gives us a different reason to keep watching. None of these require the villain to be good or agree with them. All they need is to trigger a specific psychological door. So, which type got you? And tell me which villain got left off this list.
Bullshit!